Evening, everyone. How
we
we doing?
All right. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you? First time I've managed to speak to you since you've been back from Japan.
To be fair, mate, that last one I were on was a bit of a shocker, weren't it?
Oh yeah.
Can't the live one. I missed my alarm, didn't I? I didn't know what fucking day it was.
It happens to the best of us. But to be fair, we were getting you to tune in at God knows what o'clock at night or in the morning.
I can't remember what happened. I'd had a late one anyway. Oh, that's it. My web developer. I had my web developer phone in. And I think he woke me up. I think I didn't get to sleep till about 12. He phoned me about 1:15. It must have completely disorientated me. So when alarm was going off at 4:45, I think it was at the get up for that. I honestly can't even remember turning it off.
Oh, bloody hell. Yeah. That level of disorientation. Yeah. I have been there, but yeah, it's a difficult one, especially in a foreign country as well.
You covered well though, mate.
I've rambled. Well, on the back of a couple of questions, I think somebody asked me about insulating a pond last week and about the pond balls that I used to insulate the cover. And the guy messaged me afterwards and he'd ordered some. So people seemed really interested in that. So off the back of that, I think we've got some interesting bits coming in the magazine. So it's funny how just a random question on here can spark such a big debate and get such a level of interest. That's what makes it awesome about doing it, isn't it?
Completely, mate. And everyone will try and be all inclusive. Everyone's got something that makes them tick.
Yeah.
This job for sure. You're not hearing me talking about insulation all that much, to be fair. But there we go.
Yeah. So you've been pretty much back off the plane and then straight into the koi house, it looks like.
Yeah, pretty much, mate. It's non-stop in it. I've got a little window at minute because I've felt the weather even turn more since I got back as well. So it's obviously fish I need to try and get out of the greenhouse has settled into the unheated ponds outside before it gets too cold, because that does cause some ag. There always comes a point where all of a sudden they'll go into quite a deep sulk if I'm not careful, just with a drop off, because it's still, I've got the boiler fired up now because ambiently the greenhouse is still holding out about 22, which is pretty cool. But yeah, like I say, that's still a big drop. It felt icy outside the water, really unpleasant.
Yeah, it's definitely turning, and it's more on the night, isn't it? You see the temperature swing bigger at night times, and you know, I think we're still quite warm on a night, so it's almost like I feel like they'd be happier if it were just consistent, but it's the big swings I think that really irk them off, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the issue. And we'll be talking if we don't get the way we get them outside, you know, within 48 hours they could be coming down from 22. I don't even know what it is outside, but they're going to probably be losing 8 to 10 degrees.
Yeah.
You know, if they get to a point where they're dropping into the lower end being too cold, that's when the sulk comes, because it doesn't allow them enough time to adapt.
Yeah. So we kind of picked up on halfway through your trip, and you mentioned about the NND Sankey harvest. How did that go? Can you fill us in on that?
Oh, that must have been. Is that what I was heading to that morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an expensive day.
Yeah, I know you've got a thing for NND Sankey, haven't you?
Well, you see the big girls two big girls actually swimming around up at our place, but yeah, that was good stuff. Really good stuff. Young Sankey are difficult. I think people find Sankey difficult anyway, but when they're 4 months old, it's really hard to get your head around what's going on sometimes. But I like the challenge. It was a dreamy pond full of fish that come down, and yeah, managed to eke 4 pieces away, I think, in the end off of him. So that was quite nice as well. It was a challenge to get done.
Are they staying out there then in the mud ponds, I guess?
No, that was the bit he wouldn't let me do it. Right. So quite a few of the fish that I got done, I actually managed to get hold of. It was only on the basis of I shipped them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is normal, getting fish like that off them. It's not just a given. It takes a bit of negotiation. And his angle was, through the language, it was fish change. And there's two sides to that coin in that they quote pretty high prices if you're stealing fish like that away from them. And if it goes to shit, even though I have no expectations of them doing something, they often feel the need to do something, which at that point, then they've just lost out completely. And then on the other side of it, they don't quote, the full price. So they have that fish for 4 months. All of a sudden it whacks on 10, 12 cm, maybe 15 more, and completely changes for the better or goes in the direction we think it might. They're then staring at a fish that they could have sold for 4 or 5 times the price.
Yeah.
Trust me, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, I bet. And
that ended up being the caveat.
But it was a hard pill to swallow at that Tucano event, given that GC that we had at your place. It's exactly the same that you have at your place, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why I can't. I didn't push back on it. I'm like, well, fair play, because I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I bet you're not almost looking at it too disappointing, because the growth that you achieve at your facility isn't going to be that much far off what they're achieving in the mud pond. I mean,
the only time it frustrates me is if it's a fish I think has the potential for showing in Japan.
Right.
And where that really has frustrated me is, full well the Dainichi Hiyotsori that's swimming around. So this fish was phenomenal. I got that at 15 cm, I think, and we won. I think it was 17 or 18 boo. Got first prize. The Wakagoi last year, that one. And I just knew at the time of buying it, it was a bare minimum first prize winner. Nothing to touch it. And got it over here, and it was so much smaller than everything else. But I just knew from it, if you could take that through the size classes in Japan, it would just keep winning. It was too strong, serious potential. But there was two things that breeders won't often, or that at Dainichi, they won't keep Tosai that small. And it come under the price bracket, even though it was expensive, it come under the very expensive price bracket, which is the minimum price level at which they'll keep fish at the farm.
Yeah, it's frustrating, that, isn't it?
That one, mate. But that right now, I mean, I managed to get the fish evening crafty caught up growth-wise. It's done exceptionally well, moving into Sansai now. Turned out to be female as well, just ticked every bloody box. And it is immaculate. I know from every bit of experience I've got, it would still win first prize. Even it's a potential best in variety fish. It is that good. It's going to be untouchable, and unfortunately, it's now swimming around in England.
Yeah,
which is nice. Get to enjoy it, but yeah, it seems a waste to me.
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I guess the other thing is they've Dainichi Hiyotsuri not all that common. Is that part of the factors why they won't grow it on, or is that
no, not all. All they've just got the rules. You've got to remember these guys, right? Everybody tries to leave every fish they buy there.
Yeah.
The farms get overrun if they're not careful, and it has a mass impact on resources, results, everything. There's a very big farm. I'm not going to dig into it on here, but there's a very big farm that I've seen the downsides, the effect of just being overrun with Azakari fish.
Yeah.
Serious lack. I think they're almost exhausted with it. But needless to say, on my last visit there, I wasn't impressed with what I saw. And it was one fish house, and I mean a huge fish house, just all customers' fish. Bonkers, absolutely.
Bonkers. I've seen Azakari, and then I've seen almost fish that are in Japan. I think there's almost two different ways of viewing it. When I were in one of the experience I had in Japan is the dealer who I went out with was updating on some fish that he'd left there.
Yeah.
And there was a miscommunication. He thought that it was staying for growing, and the breeder was like, "Oh no, I wanted to keep it small and I wanted to show it," and he kept it small, but he didn't show it. So essentially, it stayed in Japan for a year, not grown, not shown, and it was just a waste of time. And I think you probably have more experience from speaking with loads of different dealers, but I bet it's quite common that happens where, you know, it can get lost in translation sometimes.
Oh, Joe, honestly, it's hard work, mate. It's the side people don't see of it. And you know, a lot of the time these guys, they're not companies, they're not operations that have organization and structures. They're individual breeders whose head is generally always in a mud pond.
Yeah.
You know, or something like that. And even Taniguchi, obviously, guys, everyone involved in the Taniguchi event that we did, you know, it's been crazy. But the communication since I left Japan has been the issue, you know, and getting everything tied up and done. Yet when I was there with him,
yeah,
you know, within an hour, he knew everything going off and we got it all sorted. You know, so we are, on a side note, going to be rolling out, although we've just got a bit of tying up to do this end and then start rolling them updates out, and the shipment will be booked imminently on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, and I'm just speaking to him, and I was like, how many Azikari you got here at minute? He went, Tosai, 500. I'm like, holy shit, that's just Tosai growing to Nisai.
Yeah.
500 fish.
I can't imagine having to deal with that. I mean, you'd probably need just an employee just to deal with them 500 fish when they come out of harvest, because you and I know, and people might not think it, but a Shiro one day might look totally different in 6 months' time, and I can't imagine having to almost find these fish, and, you know, a kahaki that goes in and comes out of Shiro Muji and then trying to locate it. There's so much that goes into that.
Yeah.
It's
one of the issues. He's got color loss. You know, it's trying to keep records of all that. It's just bonkers, man. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Koi breed the easiest people at best of times, anyway.
So you kept your cards pretty close to your chest on the last stream about what you might be picking up whilst you were in Japan. How did the rest of the trip? Have you got any exciting bits that you?
Always, mate. Always.
Oh, come on! Look, it's a poker face. That. Brilliant.
Can't be in Japan and not buy a fish or 300.
No. Well, I saw you'd posted to Chris about having more asagi, so I didn't know whether or not.
No, that was, to be fair, when I got back. So the pond I was sorting out a couple of days ago. I'm growing some Nisai through to Sanzai. There's my best 4 or 5 asagis from the Oyo batch in there, and I was just blown away how they've grown disproportionately to everything else.
Yeah, they do.
They were looking absolutely bonkers, and literally, I think probably only about 10 or 15 asagi left on site. So I thought, yeah, got to do something with them again.
Yeah, well, I think so anyway.
Bonkers. Well, I have got a few bits lined up, folks. I'll probably just have a quick look at a couple of questions.
Yeah, so we've got the first question from Daniel.
Yeah.
What's happening with Koi Talk Live? Missed the content.
Yeah, to be honest, it was all just timing. You're starting to feel, the whole team was feeling a bit fatigued and exhausted with what we were doing. So we just parked that one, to be honest with you. But we are going to be back with the podcast quite imminently. To be honest, with the whole Koi Talk Live thing, it wasn't quite executing with what I had in mind in my head. I think that this sort of overlap of all the different people on with the live didn't quite come off, because it's quite, there's a slight delay, so you get a bit of crossover and things like that. So yeah, bringing the podcast back bigger and better. We've got a new studio. That's what we're kitting out at the minute. Different guests and stuff we're lining up. And yeah, obviously it'd be great if we can, to get some of the Koi Talk Live crew actually there physically for an episode or 2 on the podcast as well. So I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
But yeah, when you actually think, you sit and look at the amount of stuff we put out and we're trying to do, it can get a bit challenging at times.
Yeah, no, it's one of them. I think we had some really good discussions, but then it can get. I think we need to look at topics, and hopefully the podcast, like you said, we've got a few brands that are maybe going to come and
exactly.
I'm hoping they can be a bit aggressive with telling us why we should buy their products for from a koi talk perspective. So some exciting stuff coming, nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rory, how much do you think pond size affects growth if heated on sake and good filtration? Going to expand in the next 2 years, but worried I'm hindering the potential of good quality koi, most turning 3-4 year old.
Yeah, so you've got kind of two theories on this. Is obviously how important water volume is, and then also the theory that people say it's not necessarily about the size, it's about water manipulation. Which I agree with the water manipulation to some extent. The extent I don't is that there are downsides to this. So, I'm growing fish really well in 1,200-1,500 gallons of water. When you get the food and everything there right, you manipulate the water, you take care of it, you're going to do well. But I instantly then see a difference. I think they're getting good volume. Then I put them in the fish that have been raised in one of the 3,500 gallon ponds and instantly see, oh no, that's not quite the same amount of volume. Getting length's easy. This conversation for me is all about body volume, in all honesty. And, when I look at the food is such a big part of growing. You've got to have the temperature. That's just a given, but food is so important. And I think the big part people miss is muscle development. Obviously, the volume comes from muscle and fat. You've got to get the balance right, but muscles are a really important part of this. Hence why I've always said, of the pond length being so important in what I look to do, creating that kind of one directional current type system. You've got to think of the fish exercising. Them swimming them lengths is them building muscle. Then you obviously give them the right diet, make sure there's adequate food going in there to help build that as well. And that's where when you start looking at those two things, volume also becomes important because of the amount of food, because obviously filtration plays the biggest part in biological breakdown, but the most important part in that process, well, not the most important, an important part can also just be the water volume helping that as well. It's just an absolute no-brainer. If you've got 1,000 gallons versus 10,000 gallons and you're trying to put 2 kilos a day in there, that ammonia that's produced from that 2 kilos is just instantly diluted tenfold. So that's the given, and the amount of food you need. What we're always talking about there, when you start getting to 3, 4, 5 years old, obviously that growth drops off. That's when they really need pushing, but that's when the food levels get to crazy heights. We're talking kilos a day. And that's to not just get length, that's to get the amount of body they need to have. Because that's the impressive bit. That's what makes a 70 cm fish actually look like a 75 cm fish. It's the body mass. And I honestly believe, you can create big fish in a small pond through manipulating the water well and getting it all right. But I don't give a shit to do it properly in the standard of the Japanese with that correct volume. Big ponds are required. Water volume is required.
I think, like you say, it's the limitations how much you're going to be able to feed, and I think some people will say, well, you can just do water changes, but we've discussed that's another subject altogether, isn't it? And fish like
we look at mud ponds. So I went while I was on my last trip to NND Champion Mud Pond. I don't know how big that thing actually is, but it takes a lot of time to actually physically walk around it. And I know in that pond there's only about 30 to 40 fish.
Wow.
That is just the amount of water they have got, but not just the amount of water, the space. So you think about that water volume, pathogen pressure is going to be really low, general stress levels, everything's going to be absolutely, bare minimum. They're getting fed by automatic feeder professionally and well done with a high quality diet. Plus they're eating, power food all day. Everything in there, generally you look at that they're eating out of a mud pond, insects, whatever it is, they're high protein, high fat. It's just powerhousing, and there's no way you can replicate that.
No.
And even if we look at Taniguchi, Sakai's raising ponds, I've paced them out now. I was pacing Taniguchi's out again when I were there. They're 40 feet long. 40 by 10.
Yeah.
That's a
wide.
huge pond. I think they've got to be about 6 foot deep. Well, let's base it on 5. Get a quick calculation. Yeah, like 12,500 gallon ponds.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not sustainable for anybody in this country who's not running it as a business, really, or unless you got a ginormous wad of cash to do that, is it?
So yeah, pond size massively. It's not a complete hindrance. I know people, you can raise them, big in relatively small amounts of water, manipulating it in the right way. But for me, it's then how that fish actually looks at the end of it, and the difference between a 90 cm fish, I think I've seen raised in smaller ponds versus ones raised in mud ponds and big ponds, massively different in body.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether or not another thing is as well, if Rory has 3 and 4 year old fish, if he has Tosai in there as well. It's one of the things that I'm wondering about my own setup, is having small fish in there that are spooking the bigger fish. And now I've got bigger fish, it does worry me about I'm stunting the growth of the bigger ones, because the little ones are just flying around, zapping around, and how much I'm actually decreasing the feeding season of the bigger fish that I've got.
Absolutely, everything changes. You've really got to. That's where I've spoke a lot about segregation and bits and bobs, and in that scenario, one group will always lose out a little bit.
Yeah.
Always, the big fish are slow feeders. They're really generally steady, quite slow, quite gracious. Whereas, them little ones can get in there. It tends to be when the big ones come up, they do spook the little ones, but got to get there, haven't they?
Yeah. But all in all, creating a competitive environment's not a bad thing, is it? But at the same time, you don't want it to be mental.
No, you want it competitive in the sense of there's enough fish in there that they're not completely spooked and freaked out.
Yeah.
That's important, because you tend to get that behavior, that skittish kind of shy behavior, when there's not enough fish in the pond, which you need to be mindful of. So, but again, segregation as much as possible.
Yeah.
Which isn't easy for an hobbyist. I know that it's a bit of a nut. So when you can, if you're at that point in the hobby where you can have a separate pond, especially for raising tosai, putting a decent size nisai into a pond with bigger fish, very different scenario. But putting that small tosai in, or a group of small tosai, that's going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Oh, this one's been people have been asking me what's the minimum temperature you can go down to and still get growth.
Well,
get growth, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why we'd be wanting to really, unless you've had a bad season. Your growing temperatures are 22 to 25. That's the range we're at. 18 is conditioning. Below that is starting to bring. Well, below that you go from 18 down to between 8 and 12, in my opinion.
Yeah. The benefits in between 18 and 15 are not big enough for you to even talk about it.
No.
Yeah. I know there's some hobbyists out there that keep it at 18 degrees all year round.
Yeah.
Just 24/7 through the winter months and spring, and then through summer as well. How do you feel about that? Instead of having one growth season going up to 24, keep it at 18 all year round?
No. You need that. Joe, you just have to take me off air a minute, mate, because wife's ringing like there's something wrong. Just bear with me.
All right, yeah, no worries. So you got me for now. Yeah, but it's an interesting debate. I think, 22 degrees, like Ricky says, a good temperature for you to be still getting growth. Personally, I'm looking to drop mine down probably to 12, but then also if we have a really bad winter and it's costing me an absolute arm and a leg to heat, I'll look at going lower, maybe down to 10 or even lower than that. Like Ricky said, about 8 degrees is the absolute minimum, but it all depends on the fish's behavior at the same time. Isaac has asked a question here about. Oh, we got Ricky back. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go.
Sorted.
Yeah. I'm saying nothing. Saying nothing.
Keep quiet. It's the best way.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Any way to mitigate Koipox?
Yeah, keep your pond warmer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an easy one. It's a stress-induced virus, but mainly triggered by a lower immune response when the water's cooler.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'd say. Keep it warmer. If you're in that scenario, 12 degrees should prevent it in most cases. But if you're kind of a solid 18, you're never really going to suffer with Koipox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I had a heater on my pond, I had loads with Koipox, and then I've kept my heating consistent, like Ricky mentions, and it's just disappeared. Never came back. Do they grow out of it if they have it at Tosai, and then do they grow the next season if you're unheated? Does it come back at Nisai, Sansai, beyond?
They're generally obviously always carrying the virus.
Yeah.
So that's okay. It's there, and it's a stress reaction, which will often bring the actual pox out.
Mm.
So while their immune system's functioning well, they'll keep it at bay.
Right.
And
Okay.
when you get that dip, or like I say, a stress that then causes a dip, that's when it's going to come alive.
Yeah.
You can often even sometimes get it coming from like your 20s down to like an 18. If that process happens too much, you might provoke it at that point.
Right. Well, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah, there we go. Right, mate. Before you do any more, I'm going to jump on a bit of a segment because I believe Steve has uploaded me some stuff. Let me just find
keep putting your questions in, so we've got some stuff to answer afterwards.
Here we go. Getting all Zeusy about things now. So you'll have mentioned me. You'll have heard me mention kind of the whole with Sankey the term baby Sumi sometimes, which is when in some varieties Sumi can show early, but it can be very deceptive and false, really, and not actually be Sumi. That as they have a growth spurt, the Sumi will all fall off and often never come back. Come back in some places, but not to the extent that you saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously these Black Zeus from Dainichi, which are basically a Ginrin Komonryu, a lot of the Aragoki style as well. So that's what you've got. They the first batch I bought now, so last 2 years ago, because these are just turning Sansai at the minute. Phenomenal things, by the way, really phenomenal. I've got an updated video on one that's really there's the whole pond, the whole Dainichi ponds on a stride at the minute. It's bonkers, but yeah, this one. So people thought I was bonkers. And to be honest, I didn't 100% know what was going to happen. All I knew at that point is it's very rare for something of Komonryu blood to stay that black at that age.
Yeah.
Yeah, because these not like they were Komonryu, and I've been on a lot of journeys with Komonryu. They're a fascinating fish. And you're going to ask me as well, even I'll match this up in a minute. It's that extreme.
So when you bought this, then when you saw the auction, did you expect it? So you're saying that you expected it to drop back the Sumi as it grew.
I not entirely. I expected there'd probably be big change.
Yeah.
Because young Komonryu, as soon as they hit the hot water and start growing, all Sumi tends to fall off them anyway.
Yeah.
So given that, the reason I went with this in the end was even if it was all dark like that, I was looking at the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You look at the body on that, it's just insane. And the Sumi body was insane. With that, then the Ginrin sat on top. I thought, you know what, if they do get big, they're going to have quite a presence in a pond. So yeah, like I say, that was it as Tosai, grew through to Nisai, and then now we're just progressing on to Sansai. I might as well just share it with you. Look.
It's a beast, isn't it? It's
kept
that body shape.
So it is male, as all three of them I've got left are, but the bodies are coming on insane. This is nowhere near done yet. I think we was, let me just check, somewhere in the 60s on this one now.
It's got a hedge hammer head, hasn't it?
Oh, sorry, 58 cm at the minute. I'm expecting to be hitting 62, 63 by the end of the growing season for these. Bearing in mind this pond started a lot later. And now really for these bigger fish is when they hit their stride.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Just
what
see
you
the height of it.
What you saw there in this one from the toe side is a full, that whole Sumi, that was completely false.
Yeah.
It was never real. And this now what you're seeing, so that's all fell back. And now what you're seeing under there is the true Sumi. And those darker grey kind of areas are where the Sumi will, I believe, form, as well as a couple of other areas you can see down the lateral. But that's a hell of a pattern potential from that one.
Yeah, that's
from that to that. And this wasn't, so obviously the change here was in the first few months of growing, all the Sumi dropped off. And this is actually then now progressively been coming back more and more since, even developing over this summer period as well. But the body, I mean, these things honestly are bonkers. If you saw the big male I've got, which was as stupid as but you just see the power look in the backbone.
Yeah.
The size of the head, that length on the body, even as a male. This volume will increase probably 20-30% more by the end of growing season.
It's got a lovely face shape, like the width of the mouth, and it's
look at that backbone and just it's madness. The quality of the Sumi on them as well. You wouldn't expect any other, but it's bonkers.
You can see the height of the whole fish from the bottom to the top. Like,
yeah,
I know that bowl. Bowl looks about halfway full, and it's breaching top at water. It's just a monster, that, isn't it? But when I joined Koi Wholesale, I really wasn't impressed with these. But like, the longer I've worked and the more fish I've seen, the more I find it impressive, because I don't know what it is. I think you see a lot of fish every day, and then when you see something special like that, you can appreciate the qualities of it a bit more.
Yeah.
I think for true koi people, if you see something like that in the flesh, it changes your perception of what is good and bad about a koi.
And not even better, I'm quite sad about it, actually. I found out they've obviously attempted to move the lineage to the second generation, and it's not been a good success. You know, they're saying that the bodies are pretty shit.
Really?
Which was a big part of them, and it's a big part of Dainichi as well. So fascinating things. These all those Kawari varieties at Dainichi all stemmed from this one Botan spawning all them years ago, which was based on an enormous Sakai Karashigoi. Yeah, and this whole host of male fish that Marihiro suggested that they used.
Right.
There was all sorts thrown in there, and they've just since then kept certain parent fish, you know, fish that they've just been raising from that spawning. And this was a long time ago, raising ever since, to then stabilize all these other different varieties off of, most of which are still first generation. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's absolutely mental. Well, I hope it's something they come back to. If it's just this year that they've not done the spawning, I'm certain it's something they're going to come back to or try again with a different
I'd like to think so, but who knows with these guys?
Yeah.
You know, but I think they've really created something there.
Yeah, something different, isn't it? I think a lot of people are impressed by that. So crafty acid. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What do you expect from the skin color on the head? Yeah, well, that's obviously, there's two elements to that at the minute. Naturally, it's a bit more yellow because it's a male fish. But the main reason that color is that color at the minute is because there's that pond is on 50% color food mix, which exaggerates that. So as soon as it'll never go pure snow white, but you'll see a massive, 70% improvement in that by the time we move from growing to conditioning and getting back on that Saki white food. You know, after they had a spell on that before the growing season, they looked insanely good. So I'll make a big difference to that one.
Yeah, definitely. What a stunning fish, though. Unreal.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the other one either when you pull
that. I'd say there's 3 of them in that pond, and then my big female one, which is just on another Another planet, that.
There's one where the black has come back a lot more in comparison to the others, hasn't it? Just not on the head yet. And it's
You mean the beast, the one with
the
the
beast.
Yeah, no, that was even darker than that still.
Really?
So that's had a lot of fall off. It had a full banded pattern on the head. So I've had that fall off. The Motogoro fell back a bit, and the pattern again has dropped. And then more of the actual true pattern underneath it now is what shows through.
Wow. So you seen anything else out in Japan similar to this then this year, or anything new or interesting to rival the Black Zeus or the Yellow Monkey?
To be fair, there's one I'm keeping under my hat at the minute, which is not. It's not a new variety. It's the next evolution of a variety, which I know of a particular offspring that there's one in existence at the minute.
Right, okay.
It's a serious fucking thing that someone just picked me to the post with in autumn, to be fair. But yeah, I've actually managed to secure some of these Tosai from that, which is exciting. But if I let it out of the bag now, everyone will be swarming there.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
No, that's exciting.
But yeah, I didn't get enough places, to be fair, buddy, to really get my head into what was happening, because I was just NND to Kano, a few other visits when we were doing some work for magazine, and then down to Taniguchi.
Yeah, exciting. It's tend to see do you tend to see new stuff come to the Koi show, like bam, here's a show winning example, a bit like the Golden Corn at Taniguchi?
It didn't really, it kind of was just bam, but that fish had been hiding around his place for quite a few years before it actually got there.
Yeah.
I think it was 4 or 5 years old by the time it actually got to the show.
Wow.
Madness.
Crazy.
Absolute madness, mate.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Cool. So, fire another question up, mate. I'll just check my notes because I've still got quite a bit of stuff to go through.
All right. So, got a question. I can't see the question from that guy. So we got Taylor. What's your thoughts on Bucky Shows? Which one we've covered quite a few times out in it. I think we like them, but in terms of how they use, whether the trickle towers or
actually,
that
is a great start to the little thing I've got written down here, and it just reminded me what was my actual point on it.
All right, okay then.
Let me write them down. Cool. That was a good coincidence, that, wasn't it? Right. So where I started with this, right, because it doesn't, for me, probably one thing that doesn't get spoken about enough, and I think an area where I am excelling with how we're raising fish and showing people the benchmark for this is skin luster. Yeah, because this is something that I don't think people mention enough. You'll talk about pigmentation levels, which is again another area that has to be done right. But skin luster is something that it makes the difference from a quality perspective. Really, really sets it out there on another level. And I often think about a lot of the things we've spoke about how this is actually achieved and the things that actually damage it. And this, for me, all comes round to the water is the biggest. Water and food, realistically. Water, food, and then I'm going to chuck UV on the top as well. Because it's massively, massively a big part of it. So I think the big bit here is where we spoke about when we really went on the whole rant about water and the water that comes out.
Yeah.
Your taps, where you're getting them background elements of whatever it is, any chlorines, chloramines, heavy metals, all the rest of it, have a massively profound effect on skin luster. Because ultimately all luster is, it's very, very thick mucus. That's what you want, but when it's healthy, it's clear and it shines. The minute it turns the other way, it starts going more opaque and white. Looks horrendous. Yeah. Or if the water's really not good, you're not getting a lot of mucus, and then it's very two-dimensional because when they get that dry effect on the body a little bit, sometimes there's just not a lot of mucus there.
Yeah.
So, and it just got me thinking, actually, that the real root of all this and where it comes back round to the filter was something I've always, right, and I've got absolutely no science to back this up, as I have haven't with most of the stuff I do, but I've always been based on what I notice, and that's the experience that I've got. And my early experience was with K1 and fluid bed filtration, because the biggest early thing I noted, I came from a background of bay filtration. Yeah, multi-bays, all the rest of it. I was just getting into things when the first Nexus units stuck their head up, or actually those Evolution Aqua stainless steel modules that they used to make were rearing the head and the answer. And the very first things I started noticing with these systems that were running K1 was how well the fish fed. That was the first thing. And just how happy they seemed to be.
Yeah.
Healthy they looked, really well stimulated appetite, good skin luster, good shine, and just generally healthy looking water. Mm-hmm. with the right smell. There's that coming into it, because we can know a lot from water about how it smells at any given time when you've got experience. And that for me it was just like, I'm noticing like, shit, yeah, them fish just look different. Then I got my first systems running K1, and that's when I really started to see it's just like, yeah, it's just all the time these fish just look better. They're just different. Which I think happens for several reasons. One of the big things those systems did was introduced a mechanism where I think people were cleaning them more. Mechanical filtration probably became more efficient. Mm-hmm. And obviously the fluid bed doesn't allow for any sediment to settle in it, which is vast. But then you've got this constantly renewing, when I have spent some time with Jasper at EA, and he's sort of gone into all the different groups of bacterias, right down to the kind of rotifer level and what they actually do for the water, consuming particles down to 1 micron. Mm-hmm. Getting all this out of there. Hard to explain it all. I hope it actually does end up making some sense to people, but just the whole concept of it. And I think a lot of this came from what K1 did. All of a sudden, it's a heavily aerated chamber as well. It's, very aerobic versus the anaerobic nature that can come from the likes of multi-bays in the past as well. It's constantly renewing the bacteria in there. It's not just old and thing that the old biofilms being knocked off for new to grow. And I've just always constantly seen this different, this healthy environment. And when you actually look now, this is the system that underpins every one of my growing ponds.
Yeah.
Moving forwards. Yeah, I run the trickle towers outside. That was for convenience. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even, you just talk easy pods and static K1. I'm not singing and raving about that either. And there'll be arguments, about other medias in fluid beds. The reason I've always stuck with K1 is nothing more probably now than, to me, that is what my experience and my eyes have told me from what I've seen that has done the job and worked for me.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting at, what I help it trade, because it was something we had in a conversation about, a breeder mentioned about creating koi water. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is really the typical conversation with the breeder as well. No science involved, but this is what I see. And I think when my ponds get to the peak, because I see this, if I refill a pond, and basically did this the other day, so I've got some chagoy to separate out from a batch of fish. So I was planning to completely drain off the pond, because the water does get a bit exhausted by the end of a growing season. Yeah. And completely renew it. But I know for a fact when I do that, that pond will not function properly for around 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, even when it's warm. It has to the water has to soften down. It has to just come back to what I would call in the end kind of koi water.
Yeah.
It's not got the rawness of tap water. Everything just kind of softens down a bit. It starts conditioning and really becoming the suitable environment for koi. Mm-hmm. Not that tap water. And this is something I think, K1 helps to produce. And it's the way, obviously, in a recirculating system, in a closed body of water, what it can do to help create the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. That's what's important. That is a term me and Chris use quite a bit, creating the right ecosystem, which AKA you can call that koi water.
Yeah.
This is what it's about doing. that's right and self-sustaining without some of the factors that affect the balance of this koi water. So what I've done now instead, because I thought, right now I actually need to move these fish at the minute, which are growing really well, the pond's performing well. We didn't drain it all the way. We've just drained like a third off to move the we needed to and top that back up, so it won't have had a real impact. That water will still be functioning exactly where I need it to for me to move them fish in. But I know if I'd have drained it off completely, I would have needed a period of adapting that water back to where I wanted it. And yeah, I've just over the years, I've noticed it. I think K1's phenomenal for that ecosystem that it creates, and actually allows an environment where you don't need, you know, this whole thing of creating this koi water, if you like, is where the addition of fresh water, certainly if it's not very well treated fresh water, or it contains contaminants, metals, that's completely working against it. That's polluting that environment, taking away from your pond and that body of water naturally being able to establish itself as that ecosystem. This also ties into that part where we've spoke about this, I think, with you, where people say, you know, I've been keeping fish in that pond for 30 years and never had a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that body of water has never really been touched and nothing's interfered with. You know, this is, for me, I believe the environments I'm creating at the Koi Wholesale facilities are bridging a gap somewhere between the way a lot of people are keeping fish and the way those guys are keeping fish. You know, the extreme levels of too much interference, and then the other extreme levels of no interference. Somewhere between that is this water that we're creating that's working great guns. You know, and then the other caveat to that as well, and it's not interfered with a lot, as you know, water changing is bare minimum, well treated when we're doing it. But then the other big caveat to this as well, and I believe obviously that water is what helps to create this skin luster, massively so, and I know it for a fact. But then UV. So this is another part where I've been speaking about, because a particular pond of male fish that I had this year, again, the pond, I can't remember what had happened. We had to repair it. So it'd been filled up fresh. And my God, you know, it took a long time to get, the skin condition wasn't there. It was driving me bonkers. When it eventually I knew the pond kicked in a little bit, we got to a point where it was really high at summer. It was too warm, to be fair. We've had some strong sun. It was a couple of periods where we have actually had it. And the skin was just all of a sudden that, you know, the water was crystal clear then at this point. There was none of the usual organic staining in it or murkiness that we have from the extreme feeding. And the UV penetration then with no shade was just too much. And what I saw was a lack of luster, and then all of a sudden the Benny was becoming damaged quite quickly. I could almost see it happening in front of me. One fish that I never expected an issue with actually fell apart. Benny just crumbled on me. I was like, shit. So I actually moved them outside into a pond, one of the only two ponds outside where I've got Nexus running. And, you know, within no time, starts pulling it back around and got it.
Really interesting you say that,
bonkers. But when you actually think of the amount of interference a lot of people are having with, you know, water or maintenance or medications constantly going in or whatever it is, it's hard. You're constantly upsetting the balance of this water.
Yeah.
I think where it's at. But K1 for me, and it's the reason I won't move. You know, I've had companies come and go, well, look, our media's got 2 times the surface area of this, or blah blah blah, whatever it is. And I've gone, look, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost become like a super. I know that's an integral part of my methodology in keeping koi. Fluid beds with K1, super well oxygenated. And where that ties back into the showers is, yes, thoughts on Bucky showers. I like showers. I think in commercial settings, I think they're probably a must, because what they also do is bring something different to the table in what they can do. But I'm looking at showers more. It's quite an easy way to add some extra bio, yes, which is helpful. They're a very useful way to add a load of extra turnover without affecting the performance of a fluid bed. So I like it for that respect as well. And from that, they're also very useful for degassing which is very getting carbon dioxide out and other gases out as well as quickly as possible. That's for me where do I think most hobbyist ponds need them? No, not in the slightest. And in every system, I wouldn't choose. I say that thing. The ones I've got outside are homemade trickle towers were just my only option there. But when I've got the choice, I would always have my fluid bed with K1 as my base system, and then if needed, have the shower as that extra.
Yeah, it's like if the cost of a shower, how much K1 does that buy you?
Exactly.
Could you put another 500 litres of K1 in for the cost of a shower and its media and the pump and everything else? There's a lot to be
we look
considered.
at bacteria groups as well, and this one, and I'm gonna, in fact, put that on your job list, Joe. Chase down Jasper, because the stuff he's got on what lives in that protected biofilm. That's an important word. That area inside the K1 that is protected. The things that live in there are phenomenal.
Yeah.
These groups of bacteria, even right down to it forming what were called anaerobes, pockets that become devoid of oxygen, where denitrifying bacteria can grow.
Right.
There's all this crazy stuff going on in that tiny piece of plastic. And you see the rotifers, these living things in there that are just consuming all these particles out of the water. Bonkers. All these groups, you wouldn't get those same groups living if you just had a shower.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
One of the things that I've got my own personal theory, and it's probably more of a novice theory about why the fish from Koi Wholesale look good. And one of my big theory is the organic staining in the water. I think that's got a big part to play. It's shade, but then I also wonder if that increased turbidity in the water is helping create a healthier mucus layer.
Who knows? That's, I get you. So it's probably. I think what you're trying to say is, are other people taking too much away?
Yeah, with clear water, there's so much. Like for instance, I've got two big 60-centimeter asagis now.
Yeah.
And they had full exposure, crystal clear water, and they looked like a dark navy blue. I've since got a sheet over the top of my pond which allows rain to go through it, but it stops UV. And I turned my UV off on my drum, my amalgam UV, and I fed them, and I got that organic stain in the water, and they went like a lovely baby blue color, like the Sumi under the skin dropped, considerably because of the UV penetration they were getting. And I just wonder whether or not the organic staining in the polytunnels is almost doing the same thing as what I've done with mine. I don't know.
It's protecting the skin. UV penetration, right? This is crystal clear ponds in full sunlight are butchering fish.
Yeah,
they're butchering skin. They're literally burning it. It's no different to us.
Yeah,
no different to us, and that's what is happening there. You look at mud ponds. Yeah, sometimes they come out too soft with the pigmentation, but ultimate shine, because the UV can only penetrate so far down. And the Koi knows, it's like, oh shit, no, this feels a bit intense. They're going to disappear. They're going to naturally do that. So if you consider that Sumi is just like Benny. Sumi, the cells require UV to form properly. Yes, if you've cut that out, Sumi will naturally start to drop off, because Sumi thins as well. You can have shearos that have full patterns. It's a different sort of Sumi. I'm not going to get too much into that, but there's a sort of where you've got that full pattern Sumi, and you see it thin out. If you put that in the dark, you can literally watch it thin out, become almost translucent. A little bit. And it's just because you've cut the UV, so the cells have gone into hiding. So you will have noticed that with your asagi, mate, and that's just all that turbidity in the water is what is doing it. And that's why people often say, if they've had a period of green water, especially, the fish come out, the skin never looked so good. Because you've at that point, you've cut a hell of a lot of UV penetration out.
And that's another thing. We've got an article on coloration from a scientific point of view coming up. And the guy that I did that with, we were talking about shimmies and how shimmies tend to come on Benny. Not always, but they tend to come on Benny. And he explained it to me in a way that if you've got a red pigment cell, he says it's like your hand. You've got the base of it is all in the center. Most of the cells are in the middle, but then it branches out into different parts of the cells. And if one of them is not full of red pigment cells, that could allow like the black to come through. So if the Benny's weak and there's loads of sunlight, the sunlight can lift that black through the Benny as a shimmy. And
John,
I wonder
how do you think floating Benny's created? Floating Benny is just blocking out the Sumi.
Yeah.
That's all. It's literally there trying to stop the Sumi coming through. That's why you'll never get floating Benny when the Benny's not got enough thickness.
Yeah. So you'd get exactly the same if you gave a Goshki really clear water and loads of UV.
Goshki are one of the worst, actually, because they seem really susceptible to the likes of the Koi and Benny damage, and that Benny kind of really falling apart. Yeah. And it's right because it's a really super intense, rich color as well. So yeah, and the last really bit of that kind of rant with the skin luster is that then comes the food, because for me, you know, internally you are what you eat, all that bollocks where you get drummed into our head. I see that so much with Koi, and that's just another thing I see from Sankey Hikari. You know, and I can't say it, you know, it's not even a secret anymore, but it is one of my secret weapons. Well, I'll just call it a weapon. It's one of the weapons in my arsenal. You know, and it's like gut health. It transfers through everything, and you'll never see, you know, when you're on that diet, it's not just about growth and thing. It's that skin luster detail is just phenomenal when the fish are on that diet, and it is a part of it, because it's the health it creates in the fish from being having the correct nutrition.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back. I've done my first year on it now. And somebody put a comment earlier about it's crazy how your fish grow without you seeing them until you put them in a bowl.
Yeah.
And I've noticed such great results this year from you know, the growth. It's unreal.
Yeah.
I won't go back now.
Phenomenal stuff. And actually, excitingly, I've got the guys from Hikari coming to visit tomorrow.
Oh.
They were quite cool to meet San. I think it's been a while since I last saw him, to be honest.
Wow. From Japan?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Funny story about the last time they came, he actually came with the president's daughter, Hikari's president's daughter, and they're talking away, and I just said, you know, I've done some work experience out there. She said, oh, what farms? I mentioned Nogami, and straight away I got this. She's tapping a leg because he's got a bit of an issue with one leg. He walks a bit daft, and she buggered off outside. Like, what's going on here? She went outside and found him. Must have been to validate what I was telling her. Thought,
really?
Oh, it's a good job I weren't bullshit.
Oh dear.
No, is Hikari and Sankey Hikari the same brand? Yes, it's the same brand, but it's not the same diet. And in all honesty, just so you know, it's the normal Hikari diets I don't particularly rate. Staple Gold, all the rest of it. They're just out there with every other food that's on the market, in my opinion. There might even be other brands that are better than those ones. Sankey Hikari is, you know, the last product they created, really, and it's just in a different league to anything else ever.
Yeah.
Including, I'm loving seeing all the dealers plugging FD at the minute, because all of a sudden someone's got hold of it and everyone's acting excited because they've got their hands on something different. Cannot stand that shit, you know. So all of a sudden, like, plug this. No, not the food. The food's all right. If I had to, I couldn't get sake and I had to use something else, FD is what I would look at reluctantly.
Interesting, yeah.
But it's not in the same thing. The bit I'm getting at there is how sellers just jump on the bandwagon. All of a sudden it's like, oh, here's something new. Nah, not for me. And I know what works. And I'll certainly not be changing. Right.
Yes.
I've got 2 more bits to run through. Sorry we've not done loads of your questions, folks, because this tends to happen with me and you, mate, don't we? We get stuck into it, and
we do get on rambles, don't we?
Hope you're all still finding it useful.
I'm scared that all this koi stuff I'm learning is going to push something out really important. Like, I'll forget something really important from like my teenage years.
Absolutely. No important there, Joe. Don't worry about that, mate. This one, folks, is just for sharing. Because Dainichi Dreams. This is a fish I've raised from Tosai, now heading towards Sansai, female. She's about 62, 63 at the minute. Don't quite come through on there. Really starting to body now, but this, you talk about that whole Dainichi project, to potentially raise a fish like this out of there is just buzzing my world.
Yeah.
That's one that's going to be prized away from my cold dead hands, to be fair. Because it's such, I mean, you were talking, just turning 2.5 years old, really. It's no time at all.
Yeah.
We're talking 3 more years potentially before that fish really starts coming into its own and that Sumi starts to pop. Let me just share that with you again.
You can see that the quality of where it is up is outstanding, isn't it?
Absolutely bonkers. This is actually Dainichi Toyota as well.
Right.
I can't remember the parent set, but yeah, it's amazing. That just buzzes my world to think that out of all them, 140 odd Tosai, even to get one at that level. It's not the only fish at that kind of level in there. It is, however, the only real quality female that came out of all those fish.
Yeah.
Which is not
a lot. Yeah. The memoir on that, do you expect it'll join up to what's showing on the nose? You tend to see that it comes up quicker.
It's hard to know what's going to happen with that. Obviously, memoir's not an essential in show.
No.
It's nice when it happens. But yeah, the head pattern, time will tell. I know the nose will thicken up, but what happens with the rest, who knows? It's not even really the temperature for Sumi development at the minute.
No.
Winter will probably give us more of an indicator, and age as well. Age with the Sumi is going to be a big part with that fish, and that's just naturally with the Dainichi lineage. But that particular type of Sumi, like I say, we're probably 2 years away from really seeing it anywhere near to where I'd expect it to be.
Yeah, proper exciting piece, that.
Yeah, crazy. And that's it for uploads. So just the last one I've got to share with you, or 2 bits actually. You might have seen my little kind of personal project, the Nishikoi Journal, just me kind of, covering activities I'm up to in my little koi world. You can head, content on Facebook, but we've got the YouTube channel set up, and I believe the videos are going to start dropping on there from next Monday. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure we won't let you miss it. Quite a lot in the pipeline already from the trip, and even stuff I've been up to since I got back. And then, the other one, look out for a video dropping on the Koi Wholesale channel on Sunday. It's a nice koi appreciation video on some superb Kasei Showa or Kashiji Showa, whichever one you want to go by with it. And a nice little bit of information there on a special event that might be coming up for those fish if you like the look of them. So stay tuned for that one, guys.
That's that poker face again.
And very last one. Wednesday. So obviously I think it was fair to say that the event that Chris did with the kind of trial format went quite well. We got loads of great feedback. So we are in a phase where we're playing around with a few things at the minute, but we're going to be back next Wednesday with something similar. So look out for that one as well, folks.
Amazing. Stuff happening everywhere.
There we go. So thanks for everyone who's tuned in. Appreciate that. And I think are you back next week, Joe?
Yep.
Happy days. We'll both be back next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Speak to you later.